Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So in today's video, we'll learn about macros. So if you have already done programming, then you know about the functions, right? It's similar to the functions. So in DBT, we use macros if we have a part of code which is repeating frequently, right? So I can just create a macros for that. Okay, so first let's understand how we can create a macros. Okay, so this is also a Jinja template, right? So we can create a macro using the macro keyword, right? And just carefully observe the uh, syntax over here, right? So it start with curly brace and the percentage, then the macro keyword. So then we have a macro name, and then we have a parameters. Okay, so this is called parameters, and we have a percentage, and we have a closing a bracket, right? Flower bracket. So this is how we start with the macro keyword and the macro name. So then we have different statements. Okay, so which basically the macro will execute, and then we need to give end macro. Okay, so let me copy this, and so let me paste this inside Jinja to live parser. So here let me change this name to some ABC. Okay, so I have created a macro called ABC, and so this macro has two parameters, one is flavor and one is dessert. Okay, so if I want to call this macro, so of course to call a macro, so this is how we call a macro with the so I need to call a macro using its name. Okay, so let me copy this, and so let me paste it over here. So as soon as I paste it and change the name here, so I have created a macro with the name ABC. So let me pass ABC. So as soon as I call the macro, so I'm getting today I want chocolate ice cream. So I have created a macro, right, with the name called ABC, and it has two parameters, one is flavor and one is dessert. So these are the two parameters, right? And so here so again in the parameters we have different types of parameters, right? So we have so whenever you are passing some of the arguments to the functions, right? So we have keyword arguments, we have default arguments, right? And we have positional arguments. So right now this flavor is basically a positional argument, and this is a default argument over here, right? So here whenever I'm calling a macro, so I need to make sure that I need to pass the parameters which has been set for that macros. For example, for this we have set a flavor as well as dessert. Okay, so flavor we are passing a chocolate, and dessert by default is taken as ice cream. Okay, in case if you want to pass some other values, I can just write here dessert equals to like ice. Okay, so I can say today I want chocolate ice, right? So now this value has been overwritten by this value ice. So in case the user is not passing a dessert, then it will take a default value, that is ice cream, right? So this is a positional argument. In case if you're not passing a flavor over here, so in case if I'm just passing just a value, so right now it's acting as a positional argument, so chocolate is mapped to flavor, right? So this is how the macros work. Fine. So just remember, so we'll start a macro with the macro keyword, then we have a macro name. So then we're gonna pass the parameters here, and we have a different statements which has to be executed by the macro, right? And we have an end macro. So in our project, okay, let's try to implement macros in our DBT project. So right now, so I have created a simple model called payments.am.sql. Okay, so this is just a payments data, right? So if I just go back to my SQL, and if I just show you the raw data over here, so let me show you the raw data. So this is my all the raw data is inside my raw table, and we have a raw payments over here. So first let me choose the database, that is select use raw, and so this is the database. Then I'll do select star from raw underscore payments. Okay, so this is my table, right? So I've just created a simple model based out of this raw data set. So here I have ID, order ID, payment method, status, amount. You can see amount, it's in cents. Okay, and we have a column called created and batch start. So then I'm creating a simple model here. So I'm just selecting ID as payment ID, order ID as order ID, payment method as a payment method, So I've just renamed this columns here, right? And have a status column. And here I'm converting this amount which is stored in cents as a dollars, right? So I'm just dividing this amount divided by 100. Okay, so whatever the amount I have here, so I'm just converting that to into a dollars, right? So then created art, right? Created as created art from this source. Okay, so let's try to build this model. So if I just go and do dbt run hyphen hyphen select and the model name. So model name is payments m dot sql. This is what the model name I have given. So let me hit enter. So this will build as a view because I have not set the materialization using the config block. So by default, it will build this as a view. Okay, so does not match anything. So I made the mistake. So PAYMENTSM. Okay, I should not give dot SQL. So let me hit enter. So in case you are working with MySQL, a SQL server, then you can give .SQL. But in case of MySQL, it will throw error. Okay, so make sure you're not giving the .SQL here. Okay, fine. So it got executed. So now let me go back here and just refresh. So all my models has been built inside this dbt dev and inside the view. So I have a model called payments m. Okay, so this is my model. So let me first use that. So I'll just write here dbt dev dbt dev dbt sorry, it's dbt underscore dev. Okay, and inside this, so we have payments m. So if I do select start from payments m, and this is what the data, right? So so this was my earlier data, right? So if I just use raw and select stuff from payments. So I had a data in the cents, right? So then I've just transformed it. So using just amount divided by 100. So right now I have the data in the form of dollars. So now let's write a macro for this part. Okay. So whatever so we have amount divided by 100. So I don't want to hard code this. I want to assume like I have different models. Okay. So where all the models, whatever the data we have related to payments, I want to convert that everything to be dollars. Okay, so I can't write this amount divided by 100 in each and every model. Okay, let's create a macro for that. Okay, to create a macro, so we have a macro folder over here, right? So this is my macro folder. So let's create a macro. So let me go to the macro and create a new file. I'll just name this as sent to dollar send to dollar dot sql. Okay, and hit enter. So even the macros will take dot sql extension. Okay, so the spelling is wrong. So it's dollar. So let me fix this. dollar dollar. Okay, so this is my macro. Okay, so let's create a macro. So we know how to create a macro, right? So open with curly braces and the percentage and the closing percentage. So here we'll start with a macro keyword and the macro name. Okay, so it's good practice to keep a macro name whatever the file name you have created. So I'll just type send to dollar. Okay, and so right now it's not accepting any parameters over here, right? So let me just give it blank. Okay, so and let me end the macro as well. Okay, so this is how we end the macro percentage, and I'll just write here and macro. Fine. So I've created a macro. So now what this macro has to do? So this macro has to do just amount divided by 100. Okay. So whenever I call this macro, so this macro has to just do amount divided by 100. So let me save this and let me get back to my models. Okay. So I've created inside the stripe. We have this payments m dot sql. So I'll just replace this here. So I instead of amount divided by 100, so I'll just call a macro. So how to call a macro with two curly braces and the macro name. So what is the macro name? It is sent to dollar, right? And so here it's not accepting any parameters. So whenever you're calling a macro, so make sure you're giving this. Okay, you can just follow the same syntax whatever I have showed you here, right? So this is how we create a macro and this is how we call it, right? So right now we don't have any arguments, so I've just kept it blank here. Fine. So let me do control yes. So basically it should not throw any error, right? So like if I execute the same model once again, And so basically it should there should be no effects in the results, right? So we are just doing the amount divided by 100 here, so you can see everything is working fine. So even if I want to verify that, so let me show the result. So everything is working fine, right? So now let's see the compiled version of this code. Okay, so I can just write here dbt compile. So dbt compile and hyphen hyphen select, and the model name it's payment sm dot payment sm. Hit enter. Mm, 1 second. So it's PILE, it's current dbt compile. Okay, so if I just go to targets once inside the compiled, so we have models, and inside the models, so I have the staging, I have stripe, and inside this we have payments sm. And yes, this is the compile code. Can you see? So even though we have written this right as a macro, right? So in the compiled version, you can see the result over here. Okay, so you can see it has been returned amount divided by 100, right? And so if you observe here, so we have some extra spaces over here, right? So to remove that extra spaces, what we can do is, so wherever we are calling a macro, right? So for example, this is my macro over here, right? So inside the macro we have sent to dollars, and wherever you're calling the macro, you can just add this hyphen. Okay, so this hyphen stands for to remove the extra spaces. So here I don't want to remove, so when it starts I don't want to remove anything. So so whenever we are going for the next line, so make sure you remove the extra spaces. I want to add here and even here. Okay, so even if you try with just adding the hyphens here and see the difference in the compiled code. Okay, let me do control yes, and this is what the compiled code is, right? So so just remember this, we have the extra spaces over here, right? So as soon as, let me close this now once again, and let me save this after adding the hyphen, and let me do the dbt compile once again. Sorry, dbt compile once again. And so this is my compiled code. So this is inside this we have payments m, you can see. So right now I don't have any extra spaces here, right? So make sure you can just handle those things by adding this hyphens over here. Fine. Okay, so now let's modify this. Let me close this everything so that let me save this. Yes. Okay, so now let's so we have sent to dollars macro here, right? So if I just try to open that macro once again, so this is my macro. So instead of hard coding this as amount, okay, let's pass this as a parameter. Okay, so what I can do is, so I can just write here column name. So I'll just write here, so this will accept a parameter called column name. Okay, so here I'll just replace this amount with the column name. Okay, so this is how we write. So if we add two curly braces, okay, and just replace this with a column name. So let me write as column, column, column name, and two curly braces. Okay, so let me save this once again. So now, so I have created the same macro. I've just updated that. So whenever anyone is calling the send to dollars, the user has to pass a column name. Okay, I'm not hard coding it this time. Okay, so if I just go to my macro now, so this is my payments. Okay, so here I need to pass the value this time, right? So I need to basically tell, okay, so what I'm passing it. Okay, so and so now specifically I need to tell, I'm calling this sends to dollars macro, and it accepts one parameter there, so the one argument. So I'll just write what is that argument. So I'll just type amount. Okay, so let me do control s, and if I do dbt compile this model once again, and let's see the difference. Okay, so basically it should replace this with amount divided by 100, right? So if I just open this compiled version of this one. So you can see it has been replaced. What if I just try to change the instead of amount? Okay, so let me keep it as a payment amount. Okay, just to check whether it is reflecting or not, I'll do Control S and let me close this compiled version. And after saving this, and if I again do dbt compile, and let me open this compiled code, this one, and you can see now it has been replaced with amount, payment amount. Okay, so it's absolutely working, right? So this is how you pass a argument, right? So I don't have payment amount in my I don't have column name called payment amount, it's payment. Let me save this. Okay, I'll do Control S. Okay, so now one last time, let me do dbt compile once again. Okay, so one last time, let me check stage payments. So you can see it has been replaced with amount divided by 100. Okay, so it's absolutely working fine. So now let's try to update this as well. So if I just go to my macros and to dollars, okay, so here, so even we have a column name. So let me take even, let's handle decimal places. If I want to convert into percentage, I can do that. So let me add a decimal value. So decimal, I can say places, right? So decimal places, let me set to by default is 2. Okay, so what I'll be doing is, so I'll be taking a round. Okay, so I'll be passing inside the round function, and let me close the bracket for the round. Okay, so this round function, I'll just multiply this with 1 times of this value. And so here this round function will take the value and the decimal places. So this decimal places is coming from my uh, argument, right? So PL PLA, so spelling is wrong, so it's PLACES. So here also I'll just replace, so it's PLACES. Okay, so do Control S. Okay, fine. So here what I've done, I've just updated the macro. I've just added two parameters here. One is column name and the decimal places. So the user can pass a column name, and even user can even handle the decimal places as well. In case the user is not passing, then it will take by default too. Okay, so if I do Control S, okay, so now if I just do dbt compile once again and see the compiled version. Okay, so if I just open the compiled version, so not this one. So if I scroll down, this is, I have opened my target. Can you see this is a target? Inside the target, we have this compiled version payments. So you can see, so I'm passing inside the run function, and by default is taking 2. Okay, and because, so in my model, in my payments M, so here I'm just passing an amount. In case if you want to pass, we want to handle as 3. Okay, so I'll first let me close this. Okay, so now I'm just by default, I'm just overwriting the default property of decimal places as 3. Okay, now if I do Control S, and again if I do dbt compile, okay, so this is how you need to play with different values and check like whether it's working fine or not. Okay, so until you are good in this, all this parameter passing and everything, then easily you can just refactor your existing SQL code. So now let me go back and check the payments M. So you can see it has been replaced with 3. Fine. So, okay. So now let's build the model for one last time. So I'll just cancel this. I'll keep the by default value as 2. I'll do Control S, and let me close the compiled version. And if I, for the one last time, if I do dbt run hyphen hyphen select payments M, so basically it should show the 2 decimal places. Okay. So this model has been built. So now let's go and verify this results. So if I do select star from this, and you can see it has been the decimal places has been handled. All right, so at 2 decimal places. Fine. So this is how you create a macros. And so whenever you are giving dbt run, right, so you can see like we have some inbuilt macros, almost 178 inbuilt macros for our project to execute. So whatever you have seen previously, right? So for example, this config is one of the macro, okay, which is helping us to set the materialization property, right? So if you go to stage payment, so source is also one of the macro which has been created. These are the default macros which has been created. It taking the two arguments here, right? So one is the file source name as well as the table name, right? So even the ref function, right? So these are the various. So if you open any of the stage payments, okay, so here also we have stage, we have a used anyway ref function, yeah, ref function. So ref is also one of the macros, right? So this is how you create a macros, and we have almost different built-in macros for the different destinations. In case you're working with Snowflake, we have almost 3 to 400 plus macros, okay. For the SQL, MySQL, you have almost 178 macros, inbuilt macros. So here we have created many such examples, okay, just to show you few examples. Like here also created as a macro called calculate average order value, okay. So it's taking a reference. You can see even the model can, even the macros can refer to your existing models, okay. So I'm just taking a reference from I orders and joining with payment status. Basically it's calculating the average order value, okay. So if you want to execute this, right, so I need to just call this, right. So as soon as I call this, it will be built as so it will be it will be a build as a table or view based on the configuration you have set, right. So different examples, like here we have calculate average value, okay, calculate growth, calculate total revenue by customers, okay. So we have many different macros. You can just try with different examples. And yes, this is all about the macros. See you in the next video.